Joining us from Turner Sports is Greg Anthony. Greg, good morning.
Hey, D.A., how are you, my man?
I'm doing great, brother. Thanks so much for joining us. And let's start with the Cavaliers. Very impressive new-look Cavs performance over the weekend in Boston. What do you think about the trade that they pulled off on the trade deadline and what it means for them in the future?
You know, I don't know that they could have possibly have done a better job in terms of revamping their roster, addressing all their concerns, and still keeping the Nets pick. You got to really tip your hat to Kobe Allman and what he was able to do because he got great value for guys, and he got the things that are necessary. You know, you look at the youth and athleticism, but sometimes what you forget about, too, is this group, they're much better at shooting the three ball. They're also much better at not being the focal point offensively, meaning they don't have to try to revamp their system in order to integrate those guys. These guys are, while they're all very good players, they're all high-level role players. And so that'll help them. Keep in mind, you're going to eventually get Kevin Love back. And so you're still going to have another top-tier guy to add to that roster. I just felt like, and it's not about the Boston game. You know, listen, on any given night, anybody can beat anybody. That's not really what it was about. But the fact that they also improved defensively to go along with all of that, big picture, I think is going to help this team. And I think these moves basically catapulted them back to being the favorites in the Eastern Conference, although Toronto and Boston are going to be legit, and it's going to make it far more compelling as we head down the home stretch.
Which team do you feel is the tougher challenge in the playoffs for the Cavaliers? Is it Toronto or is it Boston?
I honestly, today I would say Toronto. And I say that for this reason. I love Boston's team, but it's just hard for me to envision a team that can win a championship when your second leading scorer gets 14 points a game. You know, if you just go look at it from a historical perspective, as good as they are defensively, Boston they're not a great offensive team. You know, and in today's era, you know, you're not going to hold a team under 100 points 7 times or 6 times in a series. And I just think that that's the one thing, not that Gordon Hayward was necessarily going to be a superstar, but he was a guy that was comfortable getting 20 a night. And in the playoffs, when you can affect systems, you can take away complementary players, you're going to have stretches where you got to have a guy or guys that can go out and create offense when there's duress, when there's adversity, when there's great defense. And that's going to be a concern for me with them. Now, Toronto, you could argue, outside DeRozan, is Lowry that kind of guy? He hasn't been in the postseason. So that's still a concern. But I just think with how they revamped their style, how much better they are offensively, I think they're the third best offensive team in the league right now, Toronto. So I think that bodes well for them. Still a lot of time yet to finish out the season, but I would give the nod today to Toronto.
Greg Anthony joins us from Turner Sports. It's hard for me to make heads or tails of Isaiah Thomas's career because when he is good, he is great. And what he did in Boston was incredible, and you want to root for a guy like that. But he keeps shifting teams, and it makes me wonder about what his role really is in the NBA. What does it say about Isaiah Thomas that he can have the high highs that we saw last year in Boston and then also be on 5 different teams this time in his career?
Well, I think that speaks more so to, listen, it's a great story, and I think most people want to root for Isaiah Thomas. I mean, I just think he's been an incredible player in terms of what he's accomplished at his size. Having said that, though, it's just hard for you at that size to kind of be a focal point player on a team that's contending to win a championship. And I think that's something that prior to even the hip injury in Boston, I'm sure Danny Ainge saw that as well. Again, not to knock him as a player. I mean, he's a terrific talent, but he's not necessarily a guy that you could build your team around. if you're trying to win it. And again, it's not that he isn't talented. It's just when you're 5'8", 5'9", man, in this league, just look at the top players in our league. Their ability to play a versatile role, impact both sides of the ball, it's a challenge for him. So I think that's why Boston went the direction they went. Again, not a knock on him, but they got a chance to get Isaiah Thomas. Kyrie Irving. You got to pull the trigger on that. Couple that with the hip injury. If you're 5'9" and you don't have explosiveness and quickness, man, the game is hard. It's hard. And you saw it in Cleveland where he couldn't get around people consistently. Now, I think he's a much better player than he proved or showed in Cleveland, but I don't know that I would look at him as a guy that's going to be perennial NBA All-Pro, All-Star caliber player, and that's why I think Cleveland made the trade after the fact. And quite frankly, as far as they're concerned, they hit a home run. And you know what? Maybe this will be a new lease on life for Isaiah, regardless of where he ultimately ends up.
Finally, when it comes to the Warriors last night, interesting to see Steve Kerr hand things over to his players. He said, I wanted to get my players engaged. My voice is being drowned out. They're bored of me. Others said it was showing up the Suns in a blowout. What did you make of Kerr doing that last night?
I thought it was a really smart move. And you know what? People are focusing on the specifics of what he did as opposed to the big picture of what he's trying to do. This is a team that has gone to 3 consecutive finals. And not only have they gone to 3 consecutive finals, they played at the highest level over the course of the regular season of anybody else, literally in the history of the game. I mean, we've never seen a team have this much success over this sustained period of time. And they can get bored and get disinterested in the game. It's hard to keep it and sustain it mentally as long as they're going to have to. So he's just trying to infuse some fun into the game, some interest into the game, excitement, and get his guys rejuvenated. And I think it's a smart move on his part because, again, ultimately, all this stuff is petty. And at the end of the day, if you got a problem with it as a player or team, then go beat them. And we're only going to be focused on what happens come June, right? Come the postseason. Ultimately, that's all we're going to talk about with the Golden State Warriors, whether or not they won it. That's the only story when it comes to Golden State. And Steve Kerr knows that as well as anybody, having been on a team that's won 3 consecutive titles, gone to 3 consecutive finals, and now he's trying to take a team to a 4th.